Pimps, pimpents, chimps, simps, gimps, limps. It is time to get to the final of the bottom 6 teams of the season recap of LIV Golf. This has been just kind of a fun series. And, there's plenty of other hot news coming out, so stay tuned on Big Boy Pants Golf. We're going to be going over some of the big news from the TGL failures right now and what that means for LIV Golf. But I am super pumped. I want to be able to get this video out about the Cleeks GC. In all honesty, the Cleeks GC easily is, to me, one of the teams out there. There's 2 teams out there that, to me, just need to get completely destroyed and demolished and redone. One of them, of course, is Majestic's GC, simply because of the whole tri-captain issue and just making sure they can get really competitive for next season. Cleeks GC is in a similar boat in that it's just kind of a hodgepodge kind of situation with players right now. 4 really established, well-known, aging veterans. One of which, though, the best player of the group is the oldest guy. And so it makes it just even more wacky. Richard Bland was the guy who finished best this season. Richard Bland in the actual season rankings finished 20th overall. So it's one of those where when you look at the team, you have legendary player Martin Keimer, who who at one point was number 1 in the world, really fell off the world in his 30s, yada yada. You have Graham McDowell, a major winner. You have Bernd Wiesberger, who has like 5 or 6 wins on the DP World Tour. And then you have Richard Bland, who in all honesty is the most unaccomplished player of the group, despite being the oldest. And yet he's been the most consistent since joining LIV Golf, placing consistently in higher spots, putting himself into good positions to make a stand on Sunday. He's had opportunities to be in final pairings and key matchup and key marquee pairings, whereas players like Wiesberger and Keimer, they're just trying to find opportunities to put them on camera because there's just not much going on. So it really just becomes kind of a question mark for Cleeks GC. What do they do going into next season? And the sad situation for them is that you have Richard Bland, who is, once again, aging up there in years. He's already over 50. And then you have Graham McDowell, who has a good personality and a good opportunity to be on camera, but he's just not performing at a way that you want him to perform. If you look at Graham McDowell for the season, McDowell finished 42nd. Wiesberger finished 41st, only because he had a decent finish as far as points, his best finish for the season in Jeddah, getting the 11th place points. Whereas Graham McDowell, like I said, neither one of them had a top 10 finish as far as the point systems go. Both of them were close to where they probably did have a top 10, but because of how LIV Golf does their individual rankings from 1 through 48, they didn't get top 10 points. Which, again, frustrating how that works. It needs to get changed. But the biggest thing right now is that it's hard to really bash on this team at this current moment in time because if you look at how they finished out the season, they took out Ripper GC in the quarterfinal matchup to be able to go to the semifinals, and that was a big deal right then and there because this is a team that people were like, yeah, Ripper's gonna win, and you're like, Ripper ain't gonna win, bro. Ripper is literally a Cam Smith show with the occasional showing from Mark Leishman, and that was it. But the Cleeks GC, all 4 of their players are generally the same quality as far as skill level goes. It's just that Richard Bland is the most consistent out of them right now. Even more concerning, though, with this team is what do they do going forward? And it's tough to really gauge it at this exact moment because if you talked to me a month ago, it would have been chop off Martin Keimer, give the captaincy to somebody else, maybe move Heinrich Stenson away from the Majestics, give him Cleeks GC, and rebrand Cleeks GC as the true European team, send Bland over to the Majestics, and then kind of, hodgepodge things together and really work those identity politics and really create a vibe and an identity for the Cleeks. However, it's tough to really gauge it at the same level right now because Martin Keimer picked it up a little bit, played well at Jeddah, had moments, didn't get points, but played well. Graham McDowell had a better back half to the season than he did the middle half of the season. And then Wiesberger, again, finished off the season strong. So it's kind of a tough vibe because it's this funky feeling where major changes need to get made, but there's also high upside potential for all four players. Well, three of the players, Richard Bland, of course, being the player that I think has the lowest upside potential simply because of his age. Remember, Martin Keimer, for all of his problems and injuries and all that jazz, he is a big name player internationally and is also a multi-major winner, and also is somebody who is still in their 30s versus Wiesberger and McDowell, who are in their early 40s. So it just becomes this really tricky situation with the team. Frankly, for me, I think the biggest thing that needs to happen I think the best thing for the team, in all honesty, is to sack Keimer. Even though Keimer is showing potential, he showed some type of potential at the end of the season. The biggest thing is that Martin Keimer only outdrove one person on LIV Golf this season, and that was Si-Won Kim. Si-Won Kim, of course, the absolute dead last player. Martin Keimer did miss several events to start the season out, but he didn't secure any points this year from his play on LIV Golf. Part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that he's just recovering from injuries constantly, so he's not in form, and also the fact that his driver distance is still significantly shorter than the average person in the field. Understand, his average drive is about 16 to 20 yards shorter than the average player on LIV Golf. That's 2 whole irons into the greens. So instead of hitting 9 irons and 8 irons into greens, he's hitting 7 irons and 6 irons, which, regardless of how good of a player that you are, that's going to be a wider dispersion pattern versus the shorter clubs, which get tighter and tighter and tighter. So to me, that's a big sign that Martin Keimer needs to have something seriously change. I don't know if he's healthy enough to start doing speed training to adjust his power or whatnot, but I know that he needs to be able to increase his distance if he's going to be relevant in the conversation. Wiesberger and McDowell are both players that have threatened leaderboards at times, and at the same time, it's the question mark of who do you get rid of? And the Cleeks, it's tough to say because they podiumed at Jeddah, right? They podiumed at Jeddah. They beat out Rippers in the quarterfinal matchup. But real talk, it's one of those where you got to make some tough choices. Bland obviously is safe for the next season, but beyond that, you don't really know what he can really bring going forward. McDowell and Wiesberger do have several more good years left in them as far as being a professional, but they have to step it up. I don't know if Cleeks GC have a true roster swap-up next season. I feel like all 4 of their players are going to come back to LIV Golf, if not come back on the same exact team. If they do, however, there needs to be significant improvement from their bodies, from their abilities, and just from their general just vibe. What is their vibe? What is their identity? What is the brand of that going forward? I think it needs to be a big step up from Martin Keimer. He's been one of the least active guys as far as captains go, as far as everything. Media, social media, posting, conversations, hang time episodes, doing stuff with Troy Mullins. Do you know who does more stuff with Troy Mullins on this team? Richard Bland and Graham McDowell. Graham McDowell's had people inside his home. Graham McDowell's had social media postings. He's had conversations, and maybe it's a language barrier issue. I don't know if that's the actual case, but that's what it may be. If it's the case, though, you can't be building teams around people that you can't do social media with. Social media is too important. So the question becomes, do you strip Martin Keimer of captaincy? Or at least give somebody else a slight bump and the captain name? I think it's what needs to happen. I think they need to move captaincy away from Martin Keimer and basically just give somebody else a captaincy. I don't know if it's pulling Stenson away from Majestics GC. I don't know if it's bringing in a new player from outside LIV Golf. It could just be something as simple as promoting Richard Bland and saying Richard Bland is now the acting captain for Cleeks GC, with Martin Keimer as they kind of give him the slight drop, as far as being able to push him out the door going forward. Because Richard Bland, in all honesty, is a success story of LIV Golf, and in many ways the darling of the team. I mean that in the most respectful way. He's awesome. He's a cool guy. He's out there playing the way that they want Phil Mickelson to play at his age. And if you look at the 50-year-olds on LIV Golf, which there are currently 3, Phil Mickelson, Lee Westwood, Richard Bland. Phil Mickelson has had some moments. Lee Westwood's had a few moments. But Richard Bland has consistent moments. He always seems to be around the leaderboard. He always seems to be shooting consistent golf. He finished well up there many times. Had a podium finish at the Greenbrier, finishing 3rd. Of course, it got overshadowed by Bryson DeChambeau's amazing play that day. But you get the point. I personally think that at this point, Richard Bland needs to be made the captain of Cleeks GC if they're going to maintain the Cleeks GC identity. If there's going to be some rebranding or some major changes in the offseason, that's cool. But the question needs to be, why are we keeping Martin Kaymer as the captain? Martin Kaymer, as a captain, has really not done anything other than just exist. He hasn't played well. He hasn't done any real social media campaigns. He's not really giving good interviews. He's not really doing anything for the brand. There aren't German companies running out there trying to get endorsements for Cleeks GC. There aren't really anything going on with Cleeks GC itself inside the team atmosphere. Martin Kaymer initially did give the extra grandeur or official status or clout to LIV Golf by joining them because of his status as a former number 1 in the world. But his game hasn't been there. He's been injured constantly, and he's just been unavailable for media in the same type of regards that other players have been. Even when I was at the Tulsa event, a lot of the other players are pretty chatty or at least kind of casual with the fans, even especially their caddies. And then you have Martin Kaymer, whose caddy really was trying to not talk with anybody. And this was not during the round, obviously. You don't talk to players during the round. This is, before the round, 3 hours before, because, they just, it's a vibe. It's a vibe. And Martin Kaymer really isn't contributing to the vibe. I think it's time to take the captaincy away from him, give it to a player like Richard Bland, maybe Graham McDowell if you really want to go that direction. But I think Richard Bland is deserving if you're not going to bring in a bigger name captain or move a player like Heinrich Stenson away from that team. LIV Golf also, the question mark becomes, are they going to expand the teams next year? Do we have more teams? And if so, we could see many of those players get broken up in Cleeks GC. Because I really do think that the way things sit, all 4 players come back to LIV Golf. But where do they stay? Do they stay on the same team? Or do they give them one here, one there, one there? Because that could work out also. This is one of the tougher ones out there because there is so little available to hate on, but also so little available to cheer and adulate. Because all 4 players have game. It's just, will it show up? And it doesn't in a consistent fashion. At least not during the majority of the season. Because you can't really look at the end of the season and say, oh, you guys went ahead and showed up strong the last 2 events. It's not really the same thing as doing everything good all year round. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below.